Welcome to a special edition of Morning Mika in a month that has seen the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk, a vigorous debate about free speech in America, and the pulling of Jimmy Kimmel off the ABC airwaves. We are honored to have four governors with us today for this discussion. Janet Mills of Maine, Laura Kelly of Kansas, Kathy Hochul of New York, and Maura Healey of Massachusetts. They're here to talk about the challenges, what they look like on the ground in their states right now. So thank you very much, all of you, for being with me. Governor Healey, I'll start with you. What do you say to the people of Massachusetts in the aftermath of such a tragedy and then the news events we're seeing here? How do you bring everyone together?
Well, I think I continue to talk, Mika, about the fact that there's no place for political violence in this country. We've seen too much of it. We've also seen too much violence generally when you go back and you think about the shootings in schools and churches. And I think all Americans need to come around together and unite that we're just going to reject that kind of violence. There's a place for civil discourse. It's also the case, though, Mika, that we need to continue to confront the issue of violence and gun violence generally, and support for mental health, support for strong gun laws. These are things that I continue to support and stand for in my state.
Governor Mills, I know your state, and I love it. It's a politically diverse place that actually elected a Democratic president by 9 points on the same day in 2020 that it elected a Republican senator by 9 points. So what lessons can you share representing the people of Maine at this time?
Well, Maine is a town hall kind of state. We have town meetings every March, some in June now. We're used to the public marketplace of ideas. We're used to having not confrontation, but disagreements that are publicly held and accepted. But we're not used to, and we do not condone violence in the marketplace of ideas. And the right to criticize the government is fundamental to our to the Constitution and to the Bill of Rights. Right to criticize is indispensable, but hate speech is not appropriate. When you're inciting violence, it's not appropriate. And we do have to turn down the temperature. As Governor Cox said the other day, we got to learn to disagree better. And that means thinking about the consequences of your words. Are you inciting violence by what you're saying? If so, then, think before you put your mouth in gear, right? I welcome the free exchange of ideas, concepts, criticisms, observations. I welcome people's ideas and welcome people's the free exercise of their First Amendment rights. But I don't welcome the kind of speech that incites violence. Nobody does, and we do have to bring down the temperature.
So, Governor Kelly, I wonder, as a Democrat leading Kansas, a red state, how you're addressing the rising threat of political violence while trying to keep political discourse civil on the ground.
Well, Mika, I have spent my entire career really working towards compromise, collaboration, consensus. And I think what's going on in our world today just reemphasizes the importance of that, that somehow we've got to break through all of this and take this opportunity to go back to a time when we yelled and screamed at each other across the table, but then went out and did what we needed to do to put good policy forward in our states. And so I am working, internally within my own administration, but in reaching out to my colleagues in the legislature in particular, to try to begin again those conversations about dealing with our differences in ways that don't incite people, but rather bring people together for the common good.
So, Governor Kathy Hochul, you represent constituents from the South Bronx to villages along the Canadian border. So how do we bring together a diverse country when the social fabric is so badly frayed and in so many different directions as well, from social media to the political discourse?
Thank you for hosting us, Mika, and good to see my fellow governors. But what you hit on is something we addressed just a few days ago. In the aftermath of the assassination of Charlie Kirk, I literally convened a security briefing for Democratic and Republican leaders across my state. Democrats, Republicans come together in person, many more on Zoom. And what I wanted to do is, first of all, let them see our threat analysis, because we are seeing an incredible escalation of threats against political leaders online. And I want them to know we're monitoring this and we'll provide security measures to protect them. So first of all, there was a high level of anxiety in our state in the aftermath because of these threats. But I also talked about discourse and how we can avoid dehumanizing speech, language that is othering, that just separates the humanity of what we're doing and saying. We can do that. We must condemn that. And everyone on that call and those meetings agreed with that. But also, I want to just be very clear that does not mean I'm going to forfeit my right to tell the truth. And that's important. So there's that balance we have to strike. You know, people are looking to us for leadership and dialing down the temperature, as you heard my colleagues say, and avoiding this. But we cannot be silenced either in this time as a result of this. And so I want to make sure we just are more careful in our language, but not just sit on the sidelines and let really what is happening in our democracy continue, because these are all threats to the fabric of what we have held dear and protected for over 250 years. So that's an important observation about talking to Republicans, talking to Democrats. We can all do a better job as Democrat and Republican leaders to dial it all back. But yeah. I'm not silencing my voice either.
Right. So dialing down the temperature is not backing down on our values at all, and that's important to make clear. I want to ask a few of you about these ICE raids. Immigrant communities across the country living in fear as ICE raids increase. States are sort of left to figure out how to protect their residents amid these federal actions. How do we balance the need to respect the laws of this land with the dignity of immigrants who strive to call America home? Governor Healey, I'll start with you.
Well, look, I come to this as a former prosecutor, attorney general. I used to work closely with feds, going after bad guys and drug traffickers and human traffickers and the like. And, you know, what I have seen so far from the Trump administration and ICE is, you know, what was supposed to be an effort to go after the worst of the worst has become, throughout our communities, the stopping and the pulling out of cars and the removing from communities and families people who have been living here, working here, construction workers, nannies, healthcare aides, factory workers. It's been devastating and traumatizing. And it also, Mika, fits with this pattern that we're seeing from the Trump administration generally. You know, ICE agents are parked outside churches, parked outside schools in an effort to intimidate and sow fear. And that's why we have people not sending their kids to school or going to healthcare appointments or reporting crime or not going to work, right? Really bad for our immigrant communities, bad for our local economies, devastating, but it's part of this effort to intimidate. And I think it's very important that we recognize and zoom out in this moment. The Trump administration is looking to activate and weaponize every federal agency against anyone who is disagreeing with them, who presents an alternative view, who's pushing back or poses some kind of a threat. And, you know, that extends from everything at Disney and Kimmel to the law firms, the corporations who are afraid to speak up, and the silencing of everyday folks, including in our communities. That's, I think, important and what's happening in this larger context. And it's very un-American to me to see that weaponization of government and also the silencing of ideas and speech and the like. It's not who we are.
Governor Hochul, you recently toured a New York facility that was raided by ICE and spoke directly with the factory staff about what happened in there. What did you learn?
It was so heartbreaking, Meek. I cannot tell you the trauma that was still relived by these owners. And I'm going to tell you, this is a very Republican part of our state. But there was a raid and they took 70 people, 57 are still, we don't know their whereabouts. But I want to also tell you this. There were 3 moms who have children under the age of 1. One of them was a nursing mom who was separated from her baby. And so we don't even know their whereabouts. And so this is the humanity, the inhumanity of what is going on here. And I wanted to put a human face on it. It's the factory workers and the bosses there, a wonderful family. They're so upset, not the fact that they now are down to just one line of work. They used to have 4 factory lines going simultaneously. Their business has been slashed because these workers, where half of the workforce are gone. And people are not lining up to go do this work to manufacture these power bars that are sold around the world. They've been there for 50 years. So you have the trauma of the employees afraid to come back. You have the trauma of the owners who cannot believe what they witnessed. And literally what they did was take people and put them in a break room and divided them by the color of their skin. It was abhorrent. And so the shock waves of these stories are starting to ripple outside the traditional Democratic bastions. And we had a similar situation in Sackett's Harbor. They took a 3rd grader out of her bed on a Saturday morning and threw her in Texas. So I think this is going to start reverberating, and people are going to start rebelling against this, and not just where you think from traditional Democratic quarters, but there's an outrage that is all over my state, even in the red areas. And so maybe the time has come for Washington to hear perhaps from Republicans who represent these areas, the congressmen who are turning a deaf ear right now. They have to speak up and say enough is enough.
I want to ask about budget cuts. President Trump's budget proposal would slash domestic programs by over $160 billion, threatening aid for education, housing, health agencies, and communities that count on them. Governor Kelly, the cuts would hit programs like SNAP and Medicaid especially hard. In a state like Kansas, where so many rural families rely on those programs, what will these cuts look like on the ground?
Well, you hit it right on the head, Mika. It is our rural communities that are going to be devastated, absolutely devastated by so many of these cuts. I mean, they will affect education. You know, we already have a hard enough time supporting our rural schools, just given the property valuations and the number of people out there. So we need that support from the federal government. But we also, we've been losing rural hospitals over the last 10 years because Kansas, unfortunately, is one of those states that did not expand Medicaid. And so while we won't have as many people thrown off the rolls, we didn't take the $8 billion that should have come into the state to really secure our foundation, our healthcare foundation. So it is very weak at this point, and the Medicaid cuts that are coming, the cutbacks to the subsidies for the ACA are all going to impact severely, particularly our rural communities. I expect that we will see hospital closures coming very soon.
Governor Hochul, Leader Schumer is working with Hakeem Jeffries to make less severe the Medicaid cuts that Republicans passed this summer. How damaging are cuts to Medicaid for all Americans, especially those in the most rural and Republican parts of your state?
We have parts of our state where well over 50% of the residents are on Medicaid. And I was representing those areas as a member of Congress, a Democrat in the most Republican part of our state. And I supported the Affordable Care Act, and I lost my seat because of those votes. But I know how important it was to provide this health care, life-saving health care to families who otherwise would not have it available to them. Now, as the leader of this state, at a time when that money has been taken away, we have over 2 million people at risk of losing this. And I also want to say this, similar to what's happening in the other states that we're talking about, we shut down rural hospitals. It's not just the people on Medicaid who won't get their baby delivered in a hospital or have assistance when your son is in a car accident. It's shut down for everybody. And so I think this is starting again, similar to the immigration issue. It's starting to backfire on the Republicans who represent those areas. And I think Hakeem Jeffries and Leader Schumer have to stand firm as they are. I have confidence in them that they'll stand up to this because they're the last line in the sand until we get a Democratic House, which we're all working hard for in New York for next year.
Let's talk about public health. We recently saw Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. make moves to curtail access to the COVID-19 vaccine. Also adding rhetoric that's been pretty misleading and some downright false. So Governor Healy, we're seeing several blue state governors, including yours, you launching vaccine counteroffensives. Republicans and Democratic senators alike have expressed concerns about RFK Jr.'s war on vaccines. Is there any more you can do as a governor, maybe working with some of these Republicans in Washington to push back against this dangerous ideology?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is an area where many of us as governors have really stepped to the fore and stepped in to create a public health infrastructure that Robert F. Kennedy is taking away. I mean, the problem we have right now is that RFK's in charge. He's dismantled public health. He's gone after all the scientists. He's taken them out. He changed the rules on vaccines. He should resign. He should be fired immediately for what he's doing. But we're not waiting around because we have public health of our residents to protect. So here's what we've done. What I did in Massachusetts is I had my public health commissioner give everyone a prescription for a COVID vaccine. I brought together insurers and pharmacists so that these vaccines are no cost, they're covered by insurance, and they're also available throughout the state through our pharmacies. And we just came out with our new guidelines to essentially replace what the CDC used to provide, because that's going away. And I am part of a coalition of Northeast states that is going to continue to work together on public health. Look, I come to this as a mother, as a parent, as a daughter with aging parents. We've got people who are under cancer treatments, immunocompromised. They shouldn't have to worry about vaccines. Tomorrow, also the CDC's meeting about childhood immunizations, and I will join along, I know, with other governors in making sure that those vaccines for childhood immunizations are remaining available through our states. It's states leading in this time.
So, Governor Mills, you, in the same line here, directed Maine CDC to expand access to COVID vaccines. What more are you looking to do to safeguard Mainers and their vaccine access?
Well, we did, and thank you to Governor Healy for helping organize the Northeast Public Health Collaborative, which Maine is a part of, and sharing scientific information, medical research, the best knowledge, the best information out there is important because we're not getting it from Washington. We joined that collaborative, and after some study and research into Maine law, we also issued last week a standing order which allows a person to obtain the COVID-19 vaccine under that standing order without a specific doctor's prescription. It stands in the place of a prescription as a sort of a universal prescription. Look, we're not going to stand idly by while the Trump administration makes it harder for Maine people to get vaccinated, to protect their own health, protect their lives. Vaccines can save lives. They do save lives. It's pretty critical that people who want to have the vaccine have it. This standing order stands up to the Trump administration and steps up to knock down the barriers that this administration is trying to impose and putting in the way of the health and welfare of Maine people. We had a pretty successful run after the pandemic. We saw Maine with one of the highest vaccination rates in the country and with one of the lowest death rates in the country based on COVID-19 data. And because we told people the truth every day, whether we, what we knew, what we didn't know, what we were looking to know, and we put vaccines out there as widely as possible. The older population definitely needs the vaccine. It's critical. And when it comes to childhood vaccinations, we have a standard that's been approved by the people. We have standard childhood vaccines. We don't want a measles outbreak in Maine or anywhere in this country. But the administration in Washington, RFK Jr., seem to be oblivious to the dangers that denying people vaccines or recommending against them will pose to the health and welfare of people of all ages.
So as we close, the issues we've been discussing in this conversation are unsettling, even painful. So I kind of have a big question to end on for each of you. We've just been celebrating the 238th anniversary of the Constitution. So the question I have, I'll start with you, Governor Mills. Are we still moving toward a more perfect union?
Oh, boy. Listen, the Constitution, many of us have read it and continue to reread it because it's so important what the founders developed in that Constitution and in the Bill of Rights. Unique in the world, longest surviving, longest lasting democracy based on the doctrine of separation of powers, limited authority of the federal government, but a republic that invites all comers to speak their piece and weigh in and have a say in their government. It's being diminished. It's diminished day after day by the autocracy, by the dictates of the current administration in Washington, which counter the will of the people, counter free speech, counter journalism, which is so critical to our access to information, counter good science, counter education policies that benefit all children, counter, the Constitution says that the president shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed. It doesn't give this president or any president the authority to make up laws through edicts, through executive orders, through tweets and Facebook postings, et cetera, or press conferences. It is a limited authority, and the Congress needs to take back its power, its authority to help demonstrate a willingness to listen to the people and to balance the separation of powers, balance the authority of Washington, and listen to the people. This is a democracy, and hopefully, if we can keep it, it'll remain a democracy.
Governor Kelly.
I think when I talk about the Constitution and democracy here in the state of Kansas, I don't think people can hear me. So I've been trying to sort of translate that so that people begin to understand what that means in real life. And I'm particularly trying to get people to understand that it is not just our immigrants, it is not just our poor people, it is not just our left-wing radicals who are being targeted by this administration, but that everybody out there ends up being collateral damage. I mean, we were talking about what happens to people if our rural hospitals close. It's not just the poor people who won't be getting access, it's everybody who won't be getting access. When we look at these illegal tariffs that have been put in, who's going to get hurt? It's going to be our farmers and our ranchers. So I'm meeting with groups here in the state of Kansas now, trying to get that message out so that they understand that they really do have a stake in all of this. And if we can get them to do that, then hopefully they'll push back on our congressional delegation in particular, and then later in the ballot box.
Governor Hochul, what do you think? Are we still moving toward a more perfect union?
I'm an optimist. I do believe that this is a blip in our history. I hope that people will take from this that we're being pressure tested. This enduring document that has guided us all these 2.5 centuries is being tested intensely. But ultimately, I do believe that there'll be a backlash against what has now evolved into a dictatorship, and that people will rebel at the ballot box. And this is actually the system that was put in place by our very wise founding fathers. So I have optimism. I have confidence that the American people will have had enough. We'll see that in the midterms next year, when we finally have a firewall in a Democratic House, at least, perhaps Senate, that can stand up with the checks and balances that are so important. But in the meantime, we do have term limits. There will be an end to this phase, and I think there'll be an absolute rebellion, just like we saw after Watergate and the abuses of power during that time when I was a young person paying attention to politics. So we had the largest freshman Democratic class in history the next year. So I don't give up on our democracy. I see what's happening, but I agree with Laura Kelly, because if you're in many of these communities talking about protecting democracy, and these are threats to our nation, people are like, well, my bills are still too high. I have a bill to pay for utilities that I can't understand why it's gone up so much in the last month. I don't understand why my holiday shopping, I'm trying to do early shopping because I know those tariffs are going to raise prices. We have to get back to that level and translate it down to, like, these policies from those people in Washington are hurting you, and let's do something about it at the next time we can go exercise that cherished right to vote.
I think affordability will be a huge issue in the elections to come. So, Maura Healey, are you hopeful still?
Absolutely. I mean, we're the greatest country in the world, and we are being tested right now. And you know, I think what we've got to combat to is fear out there. I mean, honestly, I hear from so many business executives and leaders out there, powerful interests who are afraid right now, and they're afraid because they're afraid they're going to get a DOJ subpoena. They're afraid they're going to be mistreated through some regulatory review, right? Because that's what the Trump administration is doing. They are weaponizing everything against everyone, corporations, universities, law firms, and everyday citizens. So I think it's important against that people not be afraid to speak, to talk about the harm, to talk about the impact of these devastating Trump administration policies. And there's a lot to talk about, you know, when you look at what's happening to our economy, people's livelihoods and the like. People need to continue to have the courage to speak up. I see a lot of everyday, ordinary Americans doing that. I just encourage more of it. We know what's right. We know what works. We know what doesn't work. We know it doesn't make sense to give away all our intellectual assets to China like the Trump administration is doing by cutting funding for science and research, right? We know it's not right that the Trump family is making deals and lining their pockets on crypto when everybody else can't afford health care or food or, you know, fuel. We know what's right? So let's continue to speak to it. Let's have the courage of voice right now. And I really encourage that. That's how we're going to get through this time. And this is a great country because we have great, great people.
Governors Janet Mills, Laura Kelly, Kathy Hochul, and Maura Healey, thank you very much for this conversation.